In the winter of 1879, beneath the Eternal Purity congregation in Carthage, Missouri, someone had carved 27 names into the foundation stones, each name paired with another, each pair sharing the same last name, none older than 11 years. Tell us in the comments your city and the exact time on your clock right now. How many of those children knew what the preacher meant when he spoke of keeping Cain's blood untouched? The congregation had built their church on a hill 3 miles east of Carthage proper. 17 wooden steps led down from the sanctuary to the cellar door. The door itself measured 4 inches thick, hewn from a single oak beam. Inside, the ceiling dropped to 7 feet exactly. The walls curved inward like cupped hands. Brother Ezekiel Mordecai had founded the Eternal Purity congregation in 1876. He claimed direct revelation from Scripture about bloodlines and Judgment Day. His followers numbered 43 adults and their children. They lived in 7 houses clustered around the church grounds. Mordecai taught that marriage outside bloodkin invited corruption. The pure would be separated from the defiled when Christ returned. Children born of sibling unions would inherit special grace. The youngest bride in his records was named Constance Hurley. She turned 8 years old on her wedding day. The basement held more than marriage certificates. 3 cedar chests lined the north wall. Each chest contained identical items: 7 bone-handled knives, white cotton strips cut into 4-inch lengths, glass vials filled with what appeared to be dried herbs, a leather journal bound with brass clasps. The journals recorded ceremonies in careful handwriting. Brother Mordecai wrote in brown ink that never faded. He documented each child's preparation period, the fasting, the prayers, the bloodletting that preceded consummation. He believed physical pain purified young souls. Martha Clemens lived in the house closest to the church. She kept detailed records of her own. Her ledger listed every family in the congregation: birth dates, marriage dates, death dates. The pattern emerged clearly in her neat columns. 18 children died between 1877 and 1880, all from families that practiced sibling marriage, most before their 12th birthday. Martha noted the cause of death as fever in every case. She drew small crosses next to the names of children who survived their first year of marriage. Dr. Hiram Blackwood served as the county coroner during those years. His death certificates told a different story than Martha's ledger. He recorded kidney failure, liver failure, blood poisoning, conditions rarely seen in healthy children. Blackwood noted unusual bruising patterns on several bodies, marks that suggested prolonged physical trauma. The doctor kept private notes in his medical bag. A leather portfolio contained sketches of injuries he could not explain through normal illness: bite marks on children's arms, rope, burns around wrists and ankles, scarring consistent with repeated cutting. He drew these wounds in careful detail, but never filed official reports. Blackwood's daughter Helen discovered his hidden notes after his death in 1923. She found them sewn into the lining of his medical bag. Helen worked as a teacher in Carthage. She recognized several family names from her father's sketches, children whose grandparents had belonged to the Eternal Purity congregation. The pattern had continued across generations. Helen traced 17 families through county records. Children of sibling marriages often married their own siblings when they reached puberty. The practice created closed bloodlines that rarely mixed with outside families. Medical problems compounded with each generation. Mental disabilities, physical deformities, high infant mortality rates. Brother Mordecai had established clear rules for his congregation. Children paired for marriage before age 5. No contact with outside children. No formal education beyond scripture reading. Parents who questioned the practice faced excommunication. Excommunicated families lost their homes and possessions to the church. The basement contained evidence of resistance. Someone had scratched messages into the cellar walls, names of children who tried to run away, dates when parents questioned Mordecai's authority, coordinates pointing toward safe houses in neighboring counties. The messages appeared in different handwriting styles. Multiple people had contributed to this hidden record. One message stood out among the rest. Rebecca Thorne took poison rather than marry her brother Samuel. She was 9 years old. God will judge us all. The message was signed with the initials MC. Martha Clemens had documented her own guilt in permanent fashion. The autumn of 1879 brought change to the congregation. Deputy Sheriff Coleman Watts received an anonymous letter that October. The letter contained detailed descriptions of the basement ceremonies, names of participating families, dates of illegal marriages. Someone had included precise measurements of the cellar space and locations of hidden evidence. Watts organized a raid on the church grounds. He brought 6 deputies and a federal marshal from Springfield. They arrived during Sunday morning service. The congregation was singing hymns when the lawmen entered through the basement door. They found the cedar chests exactly where the letter had described. Brother Mordecai stood before his congregation and denied all charges. He claimed the basement items belonged to previous occupants of the building. The marriage certificates were forgeries planted by enemies of the faith. The journals contained fictional stories written for entertainment. He accused Deputy Watts of persecution based on religious prejudice. The federal marshal examined the evidence in detail. The handwriting in the journals matched samples of Mordecai's correspondence with church suppliers. The marriage certificates bore official county seals that had been reported stolen in 1877. 3 of the bone knives showed traces of dried blood that appeared human in origin. Mordecai's trial began in November 1879. The courthouse in Carthage filled with curious observers from surrounding counties. Local newspapers sent reporters to document the proceedings. The Kansas City Star ran daily updates on the testimony. The story attracted attention from as far away as Chicago and St. Louis. 23 families testified during the trial. Parents described pressure to marry their children to siblings. Children, now adults, spoke about their experiences in the congregation. Several witnesses broke down during questioning. The prosecutor presented medical evidence linking sibling marriage to genetic disorders and premature death. The air in the cellar carried the scent of old copper and dried roses. Defense attorneys argued religious freedom. They claimed the federal government had no authority over marriage customs practiced by consenting religious communities. The children had participated willingly in their faith tradition. No evidence proved Mordecai had used physical force to compel marriages. Martha Clemens provided the most damaging testimony. She brought her complete ledger to court. The document proved systematic child marriage over a 4-year period. Her records showed that Mordecai had received payment from parents who wanted their children married. Families paid between $50 and $200 per ceremony, depending on the age of the children involved. The prosecutor focused on financial motivation rather than religious belief. He demonstrated that Mordecai had collected over $5,000 from marriage ceremonies. The preacher had used this money to purchase additional land around the church. He planned to establish similar congregations in other Missouri counties. Evidence emerged of a larger network. Letters found in Mordecai's personal effects revealed correspondence with religious leaders in Arkansas, Tennessee, and southern Illinois. These leaders expressed interest in adopting the eternal purity practices in their own communities. Mordecai had written detailed instructions for establishing bloodline marriage systems. He provided sample ceremonies and record-keeping methods. The letters mentioned a meeting planned for spring 1880. Representatives from 12 congregations would gather to share experiences and coordinate expansion efforts. Mordecai had prepared teaching materials for this gathering. His basement contained printed pamphlets titled Preserving Sacred Bloodlines and The Divine Purpose of Sibling Union. Law enforcement agencies in multiple states received copies of this correspondence. Federal marshals conducted raids on vows, suspected congregations in Little Rock, Memphis, and Cairo. They found similar evidence of child marriage practices. The investigation expanded into a multi-state operation targeting religious communities that promoted incest as divine mandate. Dr. Blackwood's medical records proved crucial to the prosecution. His hidden sketches provided visual evidence of child abuse within the congregation. The drawings showed systematic physical trauma consistent with forced sexual activity. Several sketches depicted children with broken bones and internal injuries. Blackwood had dated each drawing and included detailed notes about the victims' conditions. The doctor's records revealed a pattern of suspicious deaths during Mordecai's leadership. Child mortality rates in the congregation exceeded county averages by 400%. Most deaths occurred during the first year after marriage ceremonies. Blackwood had suspected poisoning in several cases, but lacked authority to perform detailed autopsies. Helen Blackwood's discovery of her father's notes came too late for the original trial. However, her testimony proved valuable during appeals proceedings. She provided medical context for the systematic abuse documented in Mordecai's journals. Her father's professional reputation lent credibility to the prosecution's case. The basement yielded additional secrets during detailed investigation. Workers removing the cedar chests discovered a hidden compartment beneath the floor. The space contained 127 small glass vials filled with various substances. Chemical analysis revealed compounds used for sedating children and inducing paralysis. Several vials contained poisons that would cause organ failure over extended periods. The hidden compartment also held detailed anatomical drawings showing child development stages. Mordecai had created these illustrations to determine optimal timing for marriage ceremonies. He believed children possessed special spiritual receptivity during specific physical development phases. The drawings showed careful attention to physical maturation markers in both male and female children. A leather-bound book titled Sacred Timing contained Mordecai's theories about child spirituality. He claimed children between ages 6 and 12 maintained direct connection to divine wisdom. This connection weakened during adolescence as physical desires corrupted spiritual purity. Early marriage preserved this divine link while ensuring bloodline continuation. The trial concluded in January 1880. Brother Ezekiel Mordecai received a sentence of 25 years in federal prison. He was convicted on 27 counts of facilitating illegal marriage and 18 counts of contributing to child endangerment. The federal judge ruled that religious freedom did not protect practices that caused demonstrable harm to children. The case established legal precedent used in similar prosecutions across the country. Mordecai died in Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary in 1887. Prison records indicated he maintained correspondence with followers who continued practicing sibling marriage in remote areas. He never admitted guilt or expressed remorse for his actions. His final letter, written days before his death, contained detailed instructions for maintaining bloodline purity through alternative methods. The Eternal Purity congregation disbanded after Mordecai's conviction. Most families scattered to different counties or states. Several children born of sibling marriages required medical care for genetic conditions that became apparent as they aged. The state of Missouri provided funding for their treatment through a special victim assistance program. The church building remained empty for 12 years. Local residents reported strange sounds coming from the basement during winter months. Children claimed they could hear crying voices through the cellar walls. Several people attempted to purchase the property, but changed their minds after visiting the basement space. The air in the cellar carried the scent of old copper and dried roses. In 1892, the Carthage Fire Department burned the church building during a training exercise. The fire consumed everything except the stone foundation and basement walls. However, the basement space proved impossible to fill with dirt. Water would collect in the depression, regardless of drainage efforts. The area remained a permanent reminder of events that occurred beneath the church. County records from the period reveal ongoing effects of the congregation's practices. Children born of sibling marriages continued experiencing health problems throughout their lives. Genetic disorders appeared across multiple generations. Families affected by the eternal purity practices required continued medical support well into the 20th century. Helen Blackwood spent years documenting the long-term consequences of Mordecai's experiment. Her research showed that genetic problems intensified with each generation of sibling marriage. Physical disabilities, mental impairments, and shortened lifespans characterized descendants of congregation members. Her work provided medical evidence supporting legal restrictions on incestuous marriages. Modern analysis of the basement evidence reveals additional disturbing details. Chemical testing of substances found in the glass vials identified compounds not available through normal commercial channels. Mordecai had obtained these materials from sources that specialized in veterinary sedatives and experimental medical preparations. The purchase records suggested systematic planning for chemical restraint of children. Forensic examination of the bone knives showed wear patterns consistent with repeated use on living subjects. The blades had been sharpened frequently and showed traces of multiple blood types. DNA analysis was not available during Mordecai's trial, but modern testing would likely have provided additional evidence of systematic child abuse. The basement wall still shows scratch marks where children tried to escape. Fingernail grooves in the stone revealed desperate attempts to claw through solid rock. Some marks reach heights of 4 feet above the floor, suggesting children stood on furniture or boxes while trying to escape through impossible means. 17 steps still led down to where the basement door once stood. The opening remains sealed with concrete, but the outline of the original door frame shows clearly in the stone foundation. Visitors report feeling uncomfortable when standing near this location. The air temperature drops noticeably in the immediate area. Recent investigation of county records revealed gaps that suggest systematic document removal. Marriage certificates for several families from the period are missing from official files. Birth records for children born between 1876 and 1880 show unusual patterns of alteration and erasure. Someone had worked to eliminate traces of the congregation's activities from public records. The pattern of document tampering extended beyond marriage and birth records. Property deeds, tax records, and court documents from the period show signs of selective editing. Information relating to the Eternal Purity congregation appears to have been systematically removed or altered in multiple official archives. This suggests coordination between multiple people in positions of authority. County clerks, court officials, and record keepers would have needed to cooperate in the document alteration process. The scale of tampering implies ongoing efforts to protect the reputation of families connected to the congregation. Modern genealogical research has identified descendants of congregation members living throughout the Midwest. Many carry genetic markers consistent with prolonged inbreeding. Medical conditions linked to consanguineous marriage appear in their family histories across multiple generations. The effects of Mordecai's experiment continue impacting people today. The basement space beneath the former church remains a topic of local discussion. Property developers have proposed various uses for the site, but none have succeeded in implementing their plans. Construction equipment experiences frequent mechanical failures when working near the foundation. Workers report feeling watched while working in the area. Local historians maintain files related to the Eternal Purity congregation case. The files contain photographs, court transcripts, and personal testimony from survivors. However, several key documents have disappeared from the archives over the past 30 years. Missing items include original photographs of the basement evidence and personal letters written by congregation children. The pattern of missing evidence raises questions about ongoing efforts to suppress information about the case. Someone with access to historical archives has systematically removed specific types of documentation. The missing materials all relate to the most disturbing aspects of Mordecai's practices. County officials acknowledge the missing documents, but cannot explain their disappearance. Archive security has been upgraded multiple times following reports of unauthorized access. Surveillance systems have captured images of people entering restricted areas, but their identities remain unknown. Recent examination of surviving evidence has revealed previously overlooked details. Chemical analysis of ink used in Mordecai's journals shows variations that suggest multiple authors. Someone else contributed to the written records, possibly helping document ceremonies or maintain organizational records. Handwriting analysis identifies at least 3 different people who wrote entries in the journals. The additional writers used different ink compositions and showed varying levels of literacy. Their contributions focused on specific types of information, suggesting specialized roles within the congregation's leadership structure. The discovery of multiple journal authors implies broader participation in documenting child marriages than previously understood. Several adults within the congregation actively participated in record-keeping related to systematic child abuse. The full extent of adult involvement in Mordecai's practices remains unknown. Modern investigation continues uncovering new evidence related to the case. Construction projects in the Carthage area occasionally unearth artifacts buried by congregation members. Recent discoveries include additional glass vials, metal implements, and cloth items consistent with materials found in the church basement. The ongoing discovery of buried evidence suggests congregation members anticipated investigation and attempted to hide incriminating materials. They scattered evidence across multiple locations to prevent complete reconstruction of their activities. The full scope of physical evidence may never be recovered. Archaeological examination of sites connected to congregation families has revealed patterns of deliberate concealment. Multiple properties show signs of systematic burial of materials during the period following Mordecai's arrest. Families worked together to eliminate evidence that might implicate them in continuing illegal practices. The basement that contained 27 names carved in stone told only part of the story. Court records from the 1880 trial listed 43 adult congregation members. Each adult presumably had children. The basement names represented only the marriages Mordecai chose to commemorate in permanent form. How many children suffered without, leaving traces in the carved stone? Martha Clemens' ledger documented 18 deaths during the congregation's active period. Medical records suggest additional unreported deaths among children whose families left the area before the investigation began. The true death toll from Mordecai's experiment remains unknown. If Brother Mordecai believed he was preparing children for divine judgment, why did he hide the evidence so carefully? If the practices represented sacred religious duty, why did every adult involved attempt to destroy documentation when authorities arrived? The pattern of evidence concealment extended beyond simple document destruction. Investigation of congregation family properties revealed coordinated efforts to eliminate physical traces of their activities. Multiple families had demolished buildings, filled wells, and relocated graveyards during the months following Mordecai's arrest. Property records show unusual patterns of land sales during 1880 and 1881. Congregation families sold their holdings at below-market prices to buyers from distant counties. The rapid property transfers suggest desperation to sever connections with the Carthage area. Several families abandoned valuable possessions rather than risk association with the investigation. Modern metal detection surveys of former congregation properties continue yielding buried artifacts. Recent discoveries include ceremonial items, medical implements, and personal belongings that families considered too dangerous to transport. The buried objects provide additional evidence of systematic child abuse within the religious community. DNA analysis of blood traces found on recovered artifacts confirms the presence of genetic material from multiple children. The blood evidence spans the entire period of the congregation's operation, suggesting continuous rather than isolated abuse. Modern forensic techniques have provided scientific confirmation of systematic violence that legal authorities in 1879 could only document through witness testimony. Archaeological mapping of congregation properties shows deliberate destruction of structures that might contain evidence. Families burned barns, filled basements, and demolished outbuildings before leaving the area. The coordinated destruction required significant planning and cooperation among multiple households. Ground-penetrating radar surveys conducted in 1998 identified anomalies beneath several former congregation properties. The surveys revealed rectangular spaces consistent with buried foundations and filled structures. Excavation of these sites uncovered additional evidence of systematic concealment efforts. One buried foundation contained the remains of what appeared to be a schoolhouse. The structure had been deliberately collapsed and covered with soil. Inside the ruins, investigators found slate boards with children's writing exercises. The exercises consisted entirely of biblical passages related to marriage, obedience, and bloodline purity. The schoolhouse ruins also contained teaching materials that revealed the extent of indoctrination within the congregation. Primer books had been modified to include lessons about sibling marriage as divine commandment. Mathematics problems used examples of calculating bloodline relationships. Geography lessons focused exclusively on biblical locations where incestuous marriage was practiced. Children's desks found in the ruins showed evidence of prolonged restraint use. Metal brackets had been attached to desk surfaces to secure chains or ropes. Wear marks on the wood indicated repeated use of restraint devices during lessons. The physical evidence suggested that education within the congregation involved systematic physical control of students. Personal items discovered in the schoolhouse ruins included children's shoes, clothing fragments, and writing implements. Many items showed signs of damage consistent with violent removal. Torn fabric and broken shoe straps suggested children had been forcibly restrained or removed from the educational setting. The buried schoolhouse provided evidence that the congregation's practices extended beyond marriage ceremonies into daily educational activities. Children were subjected to systematic indoctrination that normalized incestuous relationships and prepared them for early marriage. The educational program represented a comprehensive system for perpetuating Mordecai's beliefs across generations. Additional excavations revealed the remains of a medical facility that had operated within the congregation. The structure contained examining tables, surgical instruments, and medical supplies not typically available in rural communities during the 1870s. The facility appeared designed for procedures related to verifying virginity and monitoring physical development in children. Medical instruments found in the facility included devices for internal examination of female children. The tools showed signs of frequent use and poor sanitation. Several instruments appeared modified for use on very young patients. The medical facility provided physical evidence of systematic monitoring and abuse of children's bodies. Records found buried near the medical facility documented systematic physical examinations of all congregation children. The records tracked physical development, noted signs of sexual activity, and recorded responses to various medical interventions. Mordecai had maintained detailed files on every child's physical condition and sexual development. The medical records revealed that Mordecai had performed procedures on children as young as 5 years old. The procedures appeared designed to prepare young girls for early sexual activity and to monitor physical development in both male and female children. The records documented systematic sexual abuse disguised as medical examination. Chemical analysis of substances found in the medical facility identified compounds used for inducing paralysis and unconsciousness. Several bottles contained mixtures that would cause temporary memory loss. The chemical evidence suggested that children were systematically drugged during medical examinations and other procedures. The medical facility also contained photographic equipment and glass plate negatives. The photographs documented naked children in various poses and positions. Many images showed evidence of physical trauma and restraint devices. The photographic collection provided visual documentation of systematic sexual exploitation of congregation children. Examination of the photographic equipment revealed that Mordecai had been producing images for distribution outside the congregation. Shipping records found in the facility showed packages sent to addresses in multiple states. The congregation had operated as part of a network that produced and distributed child exploitation materials. The discovery of the photographic operation expanded understanding of the congregation's criminal activities. Mordecai had not only facilitated child marriage within his community, but had also documented and distributed evidence of child sexual abuse to external networks. The congregation served multiple criminal purposes beyond its stated religious mission. Law enforcement investigation of the shipping records led to additional arrests in several states. Recipients of the photographic materials included religious leaders, government officials, and wealthy individuals who collected child exploitation images. The investigation revealed a sophisticated network of child abuse that extended far beyond rural Missouri. Federal authorities discovered that Mordecai had been receiving payments for the photographic materials he produced. Financial records showed regular income from sources outside the congregation. The payments provided additional motivation for maintaining and expanding the systematic abuse of congregation children. The financial records also revealed that Mordecai had been receiving funding to establish similar congregations in other locations. Wealthy patrons had provided money for land purchases, building construction, and recruitment of families willing to participate in systematic child abuse. The Eternal Purity congregation represented one node in a larger criminal enterprise. Investigation of the financial network led authorities to discover similar operations in 7 other states. Each location featured a religious community that practiced child marriage and produced exploitation materials for distribution. The network had operated for over a decade before Mordecai's arrest disrupted their activities. The scope of the criminal network shocked federal investigators who had initially viewed the Carthage case as an isolated incident of religious extremism. The discovery of systematic child exploitation, financial coordination, and interstate distribution transformed the investigation into one of the largest child abuse cases of the 19th century. Modern analysis of the network's operations reveals sophisticated methods for avoiding detection and maintaining secrecy. The communities were established in remote areas with minimal law enforcement presence. Leaders maintained legitimate religious facades while operating criminal enterprises. Families were recruited through appeals to religious devotion and promises of spiritual rewards. The network's recruitment methods targeted families experiencing financial hardship or social isolation. Potential members were offered housing, employment, and community support in exchange for joining the religious communities. Once established within the communities, families found it difficult to leave due to financial dependence and social isolation. Children born within the network communities had no contact with outside authorities or educational systems. They were raised to view systematic abuse as normal religious practice. The isolation and indoctrination made it extremely difficult for victims to recognize abuse or seek help from external sources. The network's sophisticated isolation techniques included controlling all communication with outside communities. Mail was censored, visitors were restricted, and members were forbidden from traveling alone. The communities operated as closed systems that prevented information about abuse from reaching external authorities. Federal investigation of the network continued for over a decade following Mordecai's conviction. Authorities eventually identified and prosecuted leaders of 12 communities across 8 states. However, investigators suspected that additional communities continued operating in remote areas where detection remained difficult. The long-term effects of the network's activities extended across multiple generations. Children who survived the systematic abuse carried physical and psychological trauma throughout their lives. Many victims never fully recovered from their experiences within the communities. The network's impact on individual lives represented one of the most extensive child abuse operations in American history. Survivors of the network who lived into the 20th century provided testimony that helped authorities understand the full scope of the criminal enterprise. Their accounts revealed additional forms of abuse that had not been documented in recovered records. The survivor testimony expanded understanding of the systematic nature of exploitation within the communities. Medical. Examination of elderly survivors revealed physical evidence of prolonged childhood abuse. Many carried scars and deformities consistent with systematic violence and sexual exploitation. The medical evidence corroborated survivor testimony and provided additional proof of the network's criminal activities. Current residents of former congregation properties report finding additional artifacts during routine maintenance activities. Recent discoveries include children's clothing, religious texts, and personal items buried in gardens and beneath building foundations. The continuing emergence of evidence suggests that complete documentation of Mordecai's practices may never be possible. State historical archives contain correspondence between law enforcement agencies investigating similar religious communities. During the 1880s, federal authorities identified at least 12 congregations practicing systematic child marriage in rural areas across multiple states. The Eternal Purity congregation represented part of a larger network of communities that promoted incestuous marriage as religious doctrine. The network's documentation reveals sophisticated communication systems between congregation leaders. They shared techniques for avoiding detection, methods for managing legal challenges, and strategies for maintaining community isolation. Mordecai's conviction disrupted this network but did not eliminate similar practices in remote areas. Legal. Precedents established during Mordecai's trial influenced child protection laws throughout the United States. Courts in multiple states referenced the Carthage case when ruling on religious freedom claims that conflicted with child welfare concerns. The case helped establish that religious practice cannot override legal protections for minors. Modern. Examination of trial transcripts reveals testimony that was excluded from newspaper coverage at the time. Several witnesses described additional forms of abuse beyond forced marriage. Children reported systematic starvation, prolonged isolation, and psychological manipulation designed to ensure compliance with congregation requirements. The excluded Testimony suggests that Mordecai's practices extended beyond his documented theories about bloodline purity. He appeared to experiment with various forms of child control to determine optimal methods for maintaining community discipline. The full scope of his systematic abuse of children may never be completely understood. Contemporary analysis of the case raises disturbing questions about community. Complicity. The congregation operated openly for 4 years in a small county where unusual activities would be difficult to hide. Local authorities received no reports of suspicious behavior until the anonymous letter triggered the 1879 investigation. How? Many neighbors, officials, and community members knew about the child marriages, but chose silence over intervention. What combination of fear, indifference, and complicity allowed systematic child abuse to continue for years without outside interference?